I encountered like GPT-2 or something, like it was before ChatGPT. I was pretty impressed, even though it had its issues. Well, I think we're all going to be using this in 5 years, so I need to start thinking about how AI integrates into the writing process and what it means for writers in different contexts. Tech writers are kind of shifting their roles a little bit, where instead of sitting and writing paragraphs specifically to the user per se, they're actually creating the documentation that the AI functions on top of. Response in the universities has been pretty slow.
I kind of want to stop on that, Lance, and just say for young people, think about that. Hello, I'm Jocelyn Houle, your host for BetterTech. I'm really excited today to welcome Dr. Lance Cummings. Welcome, Lance.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
It's great to have you here. When I looked at your materials and bio, it's AI operations consultant. And then I was like, okay, I talked to a lot of those. And then I saw the rest of your description as AI and machine rhetorics. And I thought, okay, now it's getting interesting. Can you explain a little bit about where your area of focus is as an academic and author today?
Yeah, sure. So I actually work in the English department at University of North Carolina, Wilmington, but I focus on professional writing. And this is basically, teaching students all kinds of different kinds of writing that's not creative. So that's business writing, science writing, technical writing, online writing, all those kinds of things. And really, where the word rhetoric comes from is actually my research area and the area for my PhD. And I don't know how much people will know about rhetoric on this podcast, but it is something that we teach in writing classes. And if you take a first year composition course, you'll learn about rhetorics, but it's also taught in the speech programs, and it's also probably encountered in philosophy, but it goes all the way back to ancient Greece, where during Aristotle's time in ancient Greece, in order to create knowledge, in order to make things happen in society, in order to create reality with culture, people made speeches in the forum and in politics and law, and that's really how you made things happen back then. And what he noticed is this is going to go long, I guess, but what he noticed was that some people are better at making speeches than others, and then so he started systematically breaking apart speeches to figure out how they work, why some work and why some don't, so that he could better teach people how to become better speech makers, was kind of the premise that he made. And that's been passed down through our culture, through every change in technology that we've had. When writing was invented, we started to apply those ideas to writing, printing press, uh, the web, and of course now AI. So what machine rhetorics is thinking about how AI systems shape the way we think, persuade people, create things in the world, and how we can break those things apart and use rhetorical theory to make those work better in different ways. And
Yeah.
that's at least what I'm trying to do with machine rhetoric. So I wouldn't say that it's a solidified term at the moment, but that's kind of what I'm doing. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. One thing we didn't get a chance to talk about, and one of the reasons I'm so excited to talk to you is I doubled in English and philosophy with a focus on like philosophy of language when I was many years ago as an undergrad, and now I do AI in totally in a business context. And what has struck me time and time again is that language has never been more important. I would recommend even more wholeheartedly that people major in English and philosophy now that I am a power user of AI, because language has special properties. And I think similarly, you've kind of built your career at this intersection of language, tech, business. Let's just start with like the you problem, and then we'll talk about the societal problem. How did you personally kind of get to be interested in this area?
So yeah, it really goes back to during the COVID years. I actually was researching and exploring the creator economy, and some you may or may not have heard of it, people who are listening to this, but you're all encountering this. Probably I would consider this podcast part of the creator economy, but basically people creating content, useful content direct to audiences, oftentimes for money, So a lot of times, especially during COVID, people discovered, oh, I can actually make money by creating content specific for people. My favorite example is like a farmer who's creating YouTube videos on how to repair tractors because there's not very much good documentation out there.
Right.
And he can make money doing that because there's kind of a gap, and he doesn't have to go through big media companies and things like that. So I was kind of exploring that. And I would say that AI is a pretty, first emerged, at least from my perspective, in the creator economy, especially in terms of generative AI. And that's where I first encountered it. And I just started writing about when I encountered like GPT-2 or something, like it was before Chat GPT. And I was pretty impressed, even though it had its issues. I always thought, well, I think we're all going to be using this in 5 years. So I need to start thinking about how AI integrates into the writing process and what it means for writers in different contexts. And so I just started to explore that and using it as kind of a test case for the creator economy. So I started writing on Twitter and LinkedIn and started a blog and all that stuff. And then when ChatGPT came about, I was one of the the few people in education talking about AI. That's not true anymore, but
Right.
and that's really how I got into it. But if I dig a little deeper into my history, is just I'm really interested in how writing intersects with technology and how it shapes the way that we think about writing. That's really a big part of our field. So when for example, I grew up in when the internet came about and then Web 2.0, both of those changed the way that we think about text, about writing. It used to be that you had to be a coder to post a website, and then Web 2.0 came along. This is where you have the little box and you can write whatever you want and post it on the internet without using code. And so at that moment, we all became, at least people who are doing it became creators of some sort, and it really changed a lot of how we interact with knowledge and that kind of thing. And I think AI is a similar, if not bigger, change in that probably.
Yeah, so there's always been like a special relationship between messaging and mode, since we started doing this, right? So we were talking about Aristotle's, people would memorize long poems, and then the way we like write things changed the way we think about this intersectionality between writing, thinking, and the mode of expression, has been something that's been thought about. I'm going to ask you to do something super hard, which is characterize for me kind of where were we in that tension between the mode, the message, and the modality, right? Like where were we before ChatGPT? What had happened? And like now, where are we? Now that we have the ability to very easily create, even more easily create all of this kind of written output.
Boy, that's a good question.
This is kind of related to the whole discussion around the post-text world,
Yeah,
right?
right. So the one thing that I've been thinking about is, and I don't have a necessarily a word for it, but like a meta genre is one word
Hmm.
that I've been toying around with. I might have another one, but I can't think of it. But basically, what I'm seeing, so I work a lot with tech writers who are working with content at scale. So they of course they do individual writing and things like that, but oftentimes they're looking at ways. Well, how can I, automate in ways that help the user and also like help me focus on things that are important. So, for example, I don't want to spend all my time cutting and pasting. That's not very productive. But a lot of what we're doing in tech writing is actually shaping the knowledge that the AI functions on. So a lot of the work is going. I wouldn't say a lot of companies have accomplished this, but like I think where we're heading is like AI will do a lot of the documentation. So if you think about huge corporations like Motorola or Electrolux, and they have all this content about all their technology or their software, and they have to get that documentation to the right person at the right time, which has always been the challenge. And AI can be a boon for that, except that you really need a really strong back end. So what we're seeing is tech writers are kind of shifting their roles a little bit, where instead of sitting and writing uh, paragraphs specifically to the user per se, and they're actually creating the documentation that the AI functions on top of, which requires them to structure that documentation. Some companies are using knowledge graphs
Oh,
help
interesting.
to help
So
the
they're
AI.
curating.
Yeah,
They're act
basically curating. Yeah, and then of course, on the other end of the AI, examining the output and seeing how well it matches. Interviewing users, so like figuring out, okay, is it actually serving the users? So then the AI could take that content and write for multiple different audiences in different contexts. It can send it to an email, it can send it on a chat bot, or it can put it on a help site. Short answer to your that long answer is, shaping the things that shape the AI.
Mhm.
So instead of like, in a sense, you can look at the internet in that way too. Is that we're able to start uh, creating on the internet. We were able to shape the knowledge that was on the internet in ways that we couldn't before. Now there's some negative negatives to that, and there's some positives. I mean, you could say the same thing with the printing press, right? Too. So as the printing press got easier and easier to manage, more people could have their own printing press. We could participate more in how we shape knowledge and information. And so AI has just kind of scaled that up.
It's interesting to hear that because, I think of this as like the bookends theory of making AI useful. And by bookends, I mean spending more time curating the inputs because it's a non-deterministic model. You don't really know what happens after you put the milk in the coffee, you can't get the milk back. So a lot more time up front and then a lot more time validating and what I would call like validating and proofing, quality checking. I think in the previous world before you had the ability to push a button to get this output, a lot more time was spent on the front end and on like, assembling your materials, checking your theories, creating a thesis. All of that work now has kind of like shifted into these bookends rather than in the middle.
Right.
And so, I think that's very interesting because my analogy would really be the data world, because what people want, and I think this is true in the LLM world, is they want to just have an everything machine that fits over all the data and you don't have to do anything up front and you can trust the output. But increasingly, I'm hearing exactly the narrative that you're saying, which is that in order to get a result that's useful, you have to do this kind of upfront work. That's like preparing data or preparing the materials and this after the fact work. And my question to you is, isn't that just as much work as just writing the thing? Why is it?
So, arguably, I guess it depends on the use case. I think the way that I look at it is, like in the tech writing world, it's it seems like more work at the front end, but as you scale, it becomes less work because you have that structure there, and you're able to reproduce it often, and able to tweak it and things like that. Now, on a personal level, is it worth me, structuring all my information, before using AI to write? I mean, it depends on that. It depends on the use case again. So, for example I would use where it is certainly useful, that I've been using actually, is I'm creating a little tool, like a study abroad advisor tool, because I take students to Krakow, Poland for study abroad every year. They do like a design thinking internship,
Hmm.
and so I've kind of collecting my notes. Now you could just dump those into the AI, and it kind of maybe will do okay. But as you get more and more, like a lot of the issues that we have with AI get bigger. But I've started structuring more of that information in there. But it does save me time in the sense that, okay, I don't have to rewrite, promotional information every new year or whatever. I just need to change the information that about the date
Hmm.
that, or when I want to send a message to the group, hey, we're going to Crackus Mound tomorrow. Here's what you need to know. That information is detailed in the AI and can easily find it because I've structured it and put it in the right place.
Yeah, I like that. I like that.
It does save me time. Like, if I'm writing, I mean, I think I could argue in other cases it could also save time, but then it depends on, like, like writing a novel, I think actually probably you could do similar things. But if I'm like just writing a one-off um, blog, I may not structure as much, except that maybe I'm using all my knowledge that I've structured somewhere else to create that blog.
Yeah, no, I think that's actually a good, like heuristic to fall back on. Is like when you're thinking about how much effort you're going to put into this, and how much you're going to use AI, because it has expense as well as a different working process, which also has like some some resource allocation required for it. I would say scales definitely, right? It is also, what you're saying is, a kind of like if it's something you need to make repeatable, but also personal. Repeatable but personal, it's like your, guide that you're writing and working with your students. I would also say things like, resumes and, calling scripts. Yes, I don't know about you, but I've written a lot of those. You're right, it's useful because the fundamentals don't change, but some of the details do, and you can control that. So I like that answer quite a bit. And I wanna move on a little bit to talk about design thinking, which you just mentioned, but, is there any kind of, output that you think that shouldn't be part of an AI process? And the reason I'm specifically asking that is because A16Z recently said they're more of a media company than an investment company. And, one of the reasons is because you can create so much content now. The speaker I happened to talk with said the only thing left is making speeches because it's really something unique and you do it once in person. Is there anything like that in your mind that's sort of gonna fall outside of this revolution, or is everything gonna be everything we write gonna be transformed by AI?
Yeah, I don't know if I would break it down by genre per se, but more by like rhetoric, really. So it depends
Okay.
on the rhetorical situation. So I could have AI generate a speech, like, and but would it be the right thing to do or effective? Would it build trust? Those kind of things. In fact, I have on my website. I did a whole keynote. Actually in the early days I used ChatGPT to generate a 40-minute keynote,
Okay.
but, using all my notes, right? So like it wasn't like making it up, but um,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah,
uh,
yeah, I got you. So
uh,
you were using it as a writing partner in that situation.
yeah,
Not
yeah.
right, right, right.
Well,
Interesting.
I did have it generate everything, like, I wasn't actually editing it, but much.
Yeah.
But,
Oh,
yeah,
interesting.
but it was using my material, or my thoughts, but, and one could argue, like, okay, poetry, like, uh,
Yeah.
or but also it can be I actually wrote AI poetry in the early days of AI. I haven't been doing that in a while, but it was a lot of fun. A lot more fun with GPT-2 because it was so random, but
Yes, that's true. That was a little bit more
but,
surprising outcomes were available more and more. But let me ask you that I'm going to break the rest of this conversation into two things, sort of like the workplace world and the classroom, like where we get things done. And then maybe we can talk a little bit about cognition and ethics, some more higher level concerns at the end of this conversation. So I know that you mentioned design theory and that you have talked about, bringing the workplace. I think this probably is this same theme, like bringing the workplace into the classroom. What do you mean by that? And like, how does design thinking shape how you teach?
Yeah, so really in the English department, there's this myth in our world that, English majors, either become a teacher or a journalist or a barista, right? Which isn't really true if you look at the statistics, that English majors make just as much as business majors. It just usually takes them a little longer to find, the job that, they're looking for. And I think part of that reason is students come into the English major or they graduate without as much of a notion of what's out there. I think the English major is one of the most flexible jobs or majors somebody could have, because it has all the skills everybody's looking for, and you also come out able to analyze and learn and things like that. And so one of my goals since coming to UNCW has been to, and I'm also internship coordinator, so I want to show them what those options are. So, and I think multinational corporations, technology, that area is a underrated area for a lot of English majors. So I try to show them a lot, because there's a lot of really good jobs out there, and it's not all the negative corporate.
I couldn't agree more, and you do not have to only go into marketing either.
Yeah, yeah,
I have told this to people, like, I still think I guess there's a debate about English departments. When I was doing an English major, like half the class did it. It was a much bigger, more robust thing, right? And I've been thinking about it a lot lately because you might say, oh, you don't have to do writing anymore. I use my writing skills so much more now because you can evaluate the text that comes out and have a thesis and know what you're solving for. All of this is what is traditionally known as critical thinking. And that's really what you learn as an English. I think the main thing is critical thinking. It is the only skill that matters if you really want to be great at using AI. Anybody can write an API MCP server, anybody can code, but to really be able to interact with LLMs takes critical thinking.
yeah. In a sense, I actually, I don't really make predictions, but I do think that we maybe are, coming in. We're going to see a humanities revival at some point. Or either
Agree.
that, or we're going to move into a dystopia. I don't know which one, but we need the humanities to avoid that somewhat.
That's right. I'll come talk to your class. I'm gainfully employed, even though I was English major. So,
But
you
so
can get a
yeah, I've
job.
actually been bringing, professionals into the classroom where students can talk to them. I take students to the work sites. I actually did some ethnographic work where students would, make observations and interviews, and which is some of the research that I've done with writing communities is ethnographic work on how writing communities work in these multinational corporations, and that's
What is that? I wanna be in a writing community. What is that?
yeah. So I mean, looking at for example, tech writers, what are the different ways that they manage their projects, build connection. A lot of what I've looked at is we call communities of goodwill. So it's not just about tech writing isn't just about like sitting at your computer writing a couple paragraphs and shooting off to somebody. There's actually a lot of really interesting things people do. Learning new skills, which is one reason why AI is, tech writers are I would say many of them are on the forefront of AI. And but but, but also they have to work with people. And that's kind of goes to actually my definition of operations. And in the end, I think that this is what writers are good at. It's not just about grammar or putting paragraphs together, but operations is about understanding processes, people, and technology and how they fit together. And I think it emerges from our understanding of the writing process. If we are going to be good writers, then we need to understand, how I humanly interact with technology and other people, because I would argue that all writing is collaborative, really. And
That's right.
so, and so writers naturally bring that then to every job they have. So you see a lot of tech writers, they start, you know, taking things from different departments, working with different areas to solve problems that nobody else can really solve because they don't have that operations mindset where they're looking at humans. And so that's where the kind of the community of goodwill comes from, is that, for example, once one of the things that tech writers complain about a lot is interacting with subject matter experts, because they're the ones that don't really know how to write or communicate, and also they don't always treat tech writers with respect, or like they don't have the time or whatever. And so one tech writer was like, I always bring a cupcake to my subject matter expert when I need to go and talk to him about this technology. And so it's those kind of things that don't get picked up in the textbook and that kind of thing.
They don't. I
And
think this is
it's
fast.
important.
I've been a product manager for a long time, and that is typically where the rubber hits the road with new products is when you bring in the tech writers, because all the things that engineering didn't want to talk about, all the gaps come straight up to the surface because you have a writer in the room who's like, well, how did the user come from like point A to point B? Nobody knows the answer. There's a gap in the product, right? It's so many times it's just, that's where they're sort of turning it into a real product by talking about it in this very specific way that does, I love what this, or synthesizes the people, the expertise, and the tech.
Yeah, and I just saw a recent post from Ethan Mollick. I don't know if you know him. He's in the Wharton Business School, one of the biggest writers about AI. uh, on LinkedIn, but he posted like, "Oh, uh, we're finding that workers need to learn how to be basically, this is my term, but chameleons. Like we need to learn how to, merge into these other roles and, pick knowledge from other places and, all these things." I'm like, well, that's what tech writers have been doing for decades. In fact,
Yes.
tech writers often call themselves chameleons because they can kind of like move in the through these different groups of people.
I'm going to look that up because I think that's also the argument for a liberal arts education. We've spent so much time breaking things into these tiny slivers and in product management, which is my favorite. I've been doing product management for 20 years, but it was sliced down to such tiny little components. Not even really that fun to work on. You don't want to be in charge of the blue button.
Right.
You want to be, you know what I mean? So I'm very encouraged to hear that if experts are saying that because I think it's more fun to go to work when you have complex problems to solve rather than just stay in your lane.
Yeah. And I think kinda AI has kinda opened that up a little bit. So I did some interviews with tech writers. It's not nothing's published about it yet, but one of the things that I find is that they're using AI oops, they're using AI to um, basically upskill, but in targeted ways. So, for example, I need this little Python script to make this writing component work. In the old days, they might send that off to the developer and have to wait or take them a
Right.
couple or whatever. But now they can ask AI, okay, how might I, code the snippet, and they can test it, and then it could actually teach them about it too. And so in a sense, they're using AI to upscale and to kind of level up that kind of chameleon status.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting use case. I like that a lot. That's right. That's kind of where all this efficiency is kind of coming in the seams of the process. It's not something one thing you can point to, but it's overall creating a lot of efficiency. So interesting. So yeah, I have a million questions for you because I have teenagers. I have a teenager applying to college, and I have a teenager who's in their second year of college. And I'm sorry, so one applying, one already in college. And I don't know if you know this, but a lot of kids are having a hard time, right? With they don't teach them to write. This isn't like, oh, I'm not trying to wag the finger at kids. I just think that we don't spend as much time as an education system teaching kids to write. So, like, by the time they like, what are academic institutions, colleges, universities like you're affiliated with? What are they doing to address this? Because it sort of seems like you need to write more than ever. You've got this great tool, but people are less equipped.
Yeah, honestly, I think the response in the university has not been great. It's been pretty slow, and also,
I kind of want to stop on that, Lance, and just say for young people, think about that. I think
Mhm.
your college, your high school, you think that they're on it. I have seen just highly variable at the university level, highly variable. A few notable exceptions where they're really digging in and getting their arms around an opinion on this and a point of view, a way of it's affecting their curriculum. But for the most part, educational institutions move slow. And unfortunately, young people now live in this very fast world.
Yeah, so yeah, it's very slow, and I don't necessarily blame institutions themselves. It's partly the culture too. So like to move anything like this at an institution, like
Yes.
need faculty on board, and like the faculty perspective on AI is widely varied. So
That's right. That's right. And it's important to move slow. That's
and
their
and
job.
and it should be widely varied, like, we should have all perspectives represented, and so the students, what they're encountering is probably confusing in a lot of ways because, one professor is telling them they cannot use it, and actually it's morally wrong to use it, while another professor is like, "Use it as much as you want, you're gonna have to use it, like, you can't get away from it, it's gonna be required," and then there's everything in between, and I think that's partly where, a lot of these plagiarism cases and things like come from, not necessarily students purposely trying to use ChatGPT to cheat, but just not really understanding the context.
Yes.
Which comes back to rhetoric, by the way. Like you need to understand the rhetorical context of when and when not to use AI. But
Yeah,
yeah.
I think that's right. What would you advise students? Because that's interesting. I am an AI maximalist. My kids, like, I'm chronically online. Uh, neither one of my kids uses AI. They won't do it.
Mhm. Yeah, it is interesting. I actually personally have not had much any hardly any trouble of students using AI to produce writing, but I teach writing itself, so
Yeah.
in a very workshopped way, and students usually leave my class liking to write again, and but also, we talk about AI and we look for ways to use it in productive ways, but in a lot of ways, the AI has shown cracks in the education system that have been here for a long time, and for example, we haven't taught writing that well. We teach them writing in Comp 101, and we're like, okay, they know how to write,
Off you go.
yeah, and then they end up in their engineering program, and their, engineering professors are like, why can't these students write? And then they come to us over in the professional writing program and say, "Hey, could you create a 300 level writing program, a writing class for us because we don't want to teach it and our students can't write." You know, so
Yeah.
that's all going on underneath this, underneath everything else. And and then also, I would argue that grades are an old technology that are, don't really work. Certainly not in a writing class. A lot of the reasons students are turn in bad writing or mediocre writing or cheat or whatever is because they're worried about grades. So, um, and
Right.
and I guess if I gave students advice, what kind of students advice, I'd definitely like know your professor, whether or not they allow AI and in what ways, because it can be very nuanced, and then learn how to adapt to that. Because really, there will be instances when you graduate where this context you have to use AI. This context they don't want you to use AI. So developing that flexibility is not necessarily a bad thing, but certainly talk to professors about it so you can understand their perspective, not just like what the rule is, and and certainly do writing on your own, and even writing that's not required by professors. Daily writing without AI is perhaps one of the most important things that we need to do in an AI world, because what's going to fuel your AI? It's going to be your own writing, if you're going to do anything good with AI, in my opinion. So,
I love that thought, and it's a good jumping off point because there's a lot of debate right now of whether AI is going to enhance creativity or really sort of flatten out human expression in terms of all of these video, visual, and written sources. What's your opinion on that? Do you feel like it's going to help or hurt overall?
I
You
think
can't
it's
say
good.
both. You can't say both.
I can't say both. Okay, maybe on a cultural level, there's going to be some flattening. I honestly think, I mean, I'm not a futurist or anything, but I feel like at some point there will be some sort of mechanism, cultural or otherwise, that that's that's going to like counteract this in some way. So, for example, if all your TikTok videos are all AI, at some point most of us are going to get tired of AI and we're going to move on to something else. I was listening to somebody talking about this, where like if you can use AI to post to get the algorithm to post your AI stuff, which
Yeah,
you can produce that stuff faster because it's AI, and then
infinite AI slot machine.
it just keeps snowballing, where to the point all you see is AI stuff on these social media posts, which I would argue, I mean, is probably not going to be profitable, but like the
It
Sonora.
changes the relationship with the you said it kind of it does the consumer, the reader. It changes the relationship with the material. And I sort of think we will go back to people, saying their long poems on street corners or, that the ability to consume, right. And I love this idea of community of writers where you work or in other parts of your life because it's the collaboration, not just the output. It's not just, it's sort of like, it's not just that I wrote something, but it's the process that I think. I mean, I'll ask you, do you think that process has benefits beyond for students in particular? Like, 'cause that's my interest, right? I'm selfishly interested in my kids. Should they be, you said they should be writing every day, right? Like, what else should young people be doing right now. And they have to get jobs, right? They have to be a writer in the future in some way. Like, what are 2 or 3 skills every student should have by the time they graduate?
So yeah, I was gonna say then too on the I'll answer that in a second. Like on the personal level, I actually think AI can enhance your creativity. When used strategically. So if you're thinking like a writer, if you're thinking in terms of
That's a good point.
process and collaboration, how can I use this technology to get through this bottleneck or to help me be more creative in this area, not to take over my job, but
Mhm.
like and it goes back to your the thought about collaboration. I think students need to learn how to collaborate with people, many different kinds of people. I would argue also many different kinds of technology. So, and part of that is AI. So I do think students should be playing around with AI, and specifically in the world of writing, not just in the world of learning, but doing it strategically and learning how to test the results and all those things. And I think that's one of the key skills that students need when they graduate is being able to collaborate with different kinds of people and different kinds of technology. So that's one. And then the second one is to solve hard problems, particularly ones that have no answers and that maybe have multiple different. This goes back to multiple different solutions. So this goes back to design thinking and at problems. This is one of the reasons why I use so much of design thinking, is because instead of me giving them the answer or giving them the project, they have to take what they've learned and create some sort of solution from that together. And I think that's one of the primary skills that they need. And then the third thing would be to organize and manage complicated project and content, being able to organize that stuff for your AI or being able to organize a project that's 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 complex, that involves people and technologies and things like that, I think is going to be pretty important because AI can't. I mean, maybe in the future it can. I don't know, but like we have AI agents and everything and all that, but you still need humans like in charge of that stuff. And what skill does that require? It requires you to be able to manage and organize systems, right? So those are the three things that I really focus from. And I'll mention that those three things, or at least the first two, come from an organization called District C, in an organization in North Carolina, but it's across the nation, that brings design thinking into different sorts of classrooms, partly in response to AI, because we think that those are the skills that students are going to need. Not necessarily memorizing content. I think a lot of what our education system is built on is the idea of content is what is valuable. Okay, I have 15 weeks. I got to get through all these chapters, or they're not getting what they need, et cetera, et cetera. Well, content is not necessarily now what makes people valuable, because you can get all that content on the internet even without AI. But now you have AI and you can get a lot of that content. It's now, what can you do with content, with the content that you get? And I think those are the
Mm.
important skills. Of course, students need to develop some content expertise in one area or another, because that's how AI extends your expertise. But at the same time, like, they have to be trained on how do you use that content in useful ways, not just do you know the content, right? Which is
Right.
kind of how we've built the education system. We have a factory model. I was talking to a professor. He teaches a 300-person class. That can be nothing but content, right? Because how could you manage a 300-person class? But it's all about getting as many students, through the seats as possible, because, there's dollars per student head, kind of thing.
That's right, and people want the yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I feel like school's hard for all the wrong reasons. Should be
Yeah.
hard, but it's just hard because there's so much material to soak up. Um, that's really interesting. And you're talking about working with different types of people. We've been talking, and this happens all the time in the AI world. We've been talking a lot about the US context. Your students are here in the US for the most part. But you have some research labs in Poland, is that right?
Yeah, so I've taken students over to
Ah,
do research labs, yeah.
is there a different like, have you I'm just now let's just gossip. What have you observed? Is there a different point of view, around AI and writing in Poland or the EU? Have you noticed?
Yeah, so I mean, specifically among tech writers, I would not say, not specifically about AI. I would say the tech writing community there is younger, is kind of the difference between them
Oh, that's a good
in
point.
in the US. Uh, I would say overall, I don't know if tech writers listening to this will argue with me, but the and, but a lot of them what you often see in the tech writing field is, no few people go to school to be tech writers, and they're oftentimes creative writers who finally decide, "Well, I gotta have a job to pay," uh, so they still do a lot of creative things on the side, but then they take that creativity to these jobs, and that's where you see them actually flourish because, it does take that kind of creativity to do tech writing in this world. So but I also a lot of the folks in tech writing in the US are the same way. But I see a lot of innovation in Poland, and you know, uh, how much of that is specific
That's
to that?
such an interesting point.
Um,
I worked with, I've
yeah,
been in
man.
tech and product management for a long time, and tech writing is often was like, something that happened after the fact. But I like your point of view here. If you had younger, fresh, newly minted tech writers, now in this world, you'd want them right up front and collaborating all the way through the development process, not just like, oh, we built this thing. Can you just explain to people how to use it after
Yeah,
the fact?
yeah. And as far as like attitudes towards I guess I maybe a little more skeptical, or maybe less enthusiastic about AI, although it's still there in Krakow. I would say in at least in the circles that I'm in the US, gung ho on AI, and they're
Yeah.
doing like these massive projects. Maybe because we have the resources here. And a lot of these are older folks who probably have more time and resources. Uh,
Hmm.
and like they're super into it. And then in Krakow, they're or in Poland, they're definitely looking into AI and trying to use it in different ways, but I would say more slowly and more cautiously. And it could be for various reasons. It's probably hard to do it in Europe because there's more rules. A lot of these companies are bigger um, uh, and maybe, but also aren't willing to invest much in the structure behind the AI, right? So you have to convince your company if you want to do a big AI project in tech writing, you have to convince some investment into that technical back end and things like that. In fact, I went to a conference there in the fall, and there was me and one other person was really the only presentation on AI there. A lot of else was about accessibility, creating trust, working with people from other departments, and which is one of the reasons why I love the community there, and one of the reasons why I take students there because they just see what a strong writing community that's innovative and mindful looks like.
I think that's a really cool program, and I love this idea of writing communities that are using AI from the start. It's been a really interesting conversation. I'd love to talk with you more. For those who would like to hear more from you, where should they be looking for your writing or your materials?
So yeah, I post a lot on LinkedIn, so they can follow me there. I also have a Substack. It's called Cyborgs Writing. It's at www.isophist.com. And yeah,
Okay.
those are my two main places. Yeah.
All right. Well, I will definitely subscribe. I hope the audience does as well. We've come to the part of our interview that we are the rapid fire questions. I think these are a lot of fun and not for nothing. They look great on social media. So let's get going with a few of these. Just give me a quick answer. What's one quality that you think separates good leaders from great leaders in your mind?
I think the ability to look at the world from different perspectives, specifically user perspectives or or employee perspectives. I think a great leader is able to see their project or the thing that they're managing from all different angles in an empathetic way.
Yes, that's a good add-on.
I want to think like a user, like a user, a use,
Whom
uh,
I like.
a designer.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I want to think about the users, that like a designer. I like that. What's the recent book or movie you might recommend, or not recent?
Yeah, recent book. I saw this question and then I forgot to think about it. Um,
We can do a different one. Actually, I was thinking if you want to learn more about rhetoric, what should I do? I have to read Aristotle. Is there any other books you'd recommend?
yeah, okay, that's a good approach. So to learn more about, actually, if you really wanted to learn about rhetoric and kind of AI and writing, I would look at. I'm trying to remember their names. It's called Writing Workflows, and it's free. It's through the Writing Across Curriculum
Okay.
publisher,
Okay.
but it basically formulates the idea of the writing process as a workflow, something that you're tweaking, changing. It looks at how really good writers, what they're doing is they're always looking for places to optimize and switch out
Mm,
technologies and things like this. And this is really where a lot of my ideas about AI and
I
systems and
love that. I'm gonna
that
check
sort of
that
thing.
out.
It's very readable. It's not like super academic, and it's got like stories from actual writers and things like that. It's not like a business book, but it's still
Something
not like
heavy, something super
not
heavy. It's a
super
good starting
academic.
point. Yeah, yeah. That's what people want. It's a good, like, likely starting point
And
if
there'll
you don't.
probably be some rhetoric in there too. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Good, good, good. Can you just personally, I mean, you're doing a lot of things and you're writing and talking about one of the hottest areas. What's a habit that you personally, or a technology that you personally use to stay productive?
So writing every day.
Mm,
And finding a tool that's inspiring for me to write every day. So, for example, LinkedIn, uh, uh, sure, it's about getting followers and getting engagement and all that, but also it's about testing thoughts. It's about testing ideas, um, hearing what other people are thinking. Really, it goes back to what essays were really meant for. It wasn't to get into college or to examine your content, how much content you remember. It was the whole point of an essay in the 19th century was to get your idea out there fast, find out what people think about it, and then revise. So I think writing socially online, maybe not every day, but 2 or 3 times a week is really key to help you develop your thoughts, and then keep those and organize those because you can use those thoughts in your AI to help you write things, or use it yourself to write things. But really, it's important that I think every person start writing their thoughts down more so than ever before.
um, all electronic format or paper and pencil? Where are you coming out on this debate?
Yeah, so I'm almost entirely electronic.
Okay.
And I think the advantage of that, I mean, it's hard to give up the searchable aspect of that, and also with AI now, so you can structure those notes and put it in the AI and do some really interesting things with it. So it's hard for me to give up that, but I totally understand people who write on paper. I also write really slow on paper, and it drives me nuts.
Yeah, my handwriting has gotten pretty bad over the years as well. And I'm just curious about this. As a writer, do you when you're interacting with, and I assume most of the time you're just using the web interface for like Claude or ChatGPT. Do you do it do you write to your LLM or do you speak to it?
I write to it. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, it's an interesting question because I totally get, like, sometimes I speak to it and I totally get how, and that's probably where we're moving. I
I
think
think so. I think that's what the
we'll be
kids
the
do.
old
Yeah,
person who's still writing into Chat GPT, but all our students will be speaking to it.
I think so.
Uh, but maybe I'll change too because I totally see like the advantage of that. But I think there's still that connection between my brain and my hands
For
that I
me,
can't really break.
I
Yeah,
can't come up with a good question. I feel like I'm babbling.
yeah.
Yeah. And then my friend made fun of me and she was like, "Are you afraid the LLM's gonna judge you for having unformed thoughts?" And I was like, "Yes. Yes, I do worry about that."
I would argue though that a thoughtful, well-written prompt can make a difference depending on what you're doing. Now, there are some instances where speaking it out and just dumping it in can also be useful, but yeah, I wouldn't degradate the well-structured prompt yet, just yet.
I haven't got there yet either. I need to learn to talk out loud to think, but I have to write to think. It's so great to connect with you, Lance. I am going to definitely subscribe to your newsletter. Or sorry, not your newsletter. It's a Substack, right?
Yeah, it's a newsletter, but it's kind of a new
I'll subscribe to
call it
this the
newsletter.
Substack and
Substack's
follow you.
Substack's an interesting beast, but that's another conversation.
It sure is. It sure is. Anyway, great conversation. Hope to have you back soon with any of your new observations. I'm sure you'll have many more observations over the next year as we continue rocketing through this new way of expressing ourselves.
All right, cool. Thank you for having me. These are great questions, great conversation. Thank you.